Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We've got one old friend of the show, one new friend of the show. Dr. Trita Parsi is going to be on talking about the Biden foreign policy, some interesting moves there with regards to arms sales. We also have, first time on the show, Shu On-Het is going to join us to talk about her latest video. She was at the January 6th insurrection rally here and got some really interesting footage, so we'll be talking to her as well. But we wanted to start with the latest doings in the United States Senate and the brewing GOP civil war.
Yeah, that's right. So this is pretty interesting. So Susan Collins and Tim Kaine, they're teaming up to censure a censure resolution against Trump that would seek to bar Trump holding office again. Now, you'll be familiar, I think, with some of this. We talked about it in some of the early days right after the January 6th Capitol riots, in which we talked about how there is a provision within the 14th Amendment of the Constitution barring anybody who participated, incited, or the language is, mixed or whatever in terms of how it would work out, but around insurrection. And so that was something that I actually saw. It was largely coming from the progressive left. And now that it appears that all of the votes for impeachment have essentially just the hope of any more than 5 GOP senators basically died when all but 5 voted in order to table impeachment because it wasn't constitutional, even Mitch McConnell joining in there. It essentially showed that wasn't going to happen. But many Republicans have said on the record that they would support some censor effort. Not necessarily the ones in the Senate, but a lot more people in the House, including like the GOP leader, Kevin McCarthy himself. So if it was just pure censure, then I think it would be plausible. But given that it would seek to bar him from office, very unlikely. And you and I were talking about this right before the show, which is that even though censure and all this is 51 votes, not the resolution, but in general, like legislation trying to bar Trump holding office, 51 votes, it would deprive everybody of the kayfabe, fake theater that they want of they need to be able to say, we impeached Trump.
Right.
And then the Republicans need to be able to say, we stopped impeachment. They don't actually care, even I think on both sides about doing this. And so that's basically where we're at.
I mean, actually, in a weird way, the Republicans may have more motive for him to be barred from office, but that doesn't mean that they will act in that regard because obviously any individual one of them does not want to be on the record as barring him for office. So, look, here's how I look at this. This is the 14th Amendment, Section 3, 14th Amendment solution that we talked about early on that doesn't require impeachment conviction, requires 2/3 of the Senate. This would be subject to a filibuster, so you'd still have to get to 60, but it's a somewhat lower bar. And what's a little bit uncomfortable for Republicans is with impeachment, they've gone all in on this messaging. Rather than dealing with the merits of what the president said and did, the messaging is around, this isn't constitutional because he's already out of office. So why are we impeaching someone who's already out of office and they have legal arguments? Right. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really know if those legal arguments have merit or not. Obviously, they're not being offered in good faith here.
Nobody knows.
They're an attempt to avoid the issue. Right, it's untested terrain is the fact of the matter. So nobody really knows whether those legal arguments have merit, but they're trying to avoid the crux of the issue. That would be a little bit harder to do with this type of resolution. It would declare that the January 6th attack on the Capitol was an insurrection against the Constitution, an effort to stop Congress from, quote, undertaking its constitutional duty to count electoral votes, finds that Trump gave aid and comfort to the insurrectionists by repeatedly lying about the election, slandering election officials, pressuring others to come to Washington for a wild event, those are his words, and encouraging them to come up to Congress. The language is pulled directly from Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, I think this is the route they should have taken from the beginning because it has a greater chance of succeeding and it's a faster process, so it doesn't tie up as much Senate time. But I want to really temper expectations here. Chuck Schumer, we can throw this up on the screen, has already basically shot down the idea, saying that he wants to make sure that they go forward with, this is A1B, that we should put up there on the screen, A1B. He wants to make sure that they go forward with impeachment, trial, and a vote on conviction. Now, just because you do that doesn't preclude you from also traveling this path and trying with the 14th Amendment. But look, the bottom line is, regardless of the argument that they make, Republicans have shown they really don't want to do anything to have accountability. So even though they've glommed onto this particular constitutional argument that wouldn't work in this case, don't you worry, they would find some other argument, probably another like constitutional procedural argument to avoid having to deal with the merits on this type of censure as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's all because of the pressure that they're beginning to face from their base. And actually, Trump's approval rating, we'll talk about this later in the show, is actually gone up amongst Republicans. And let's throw this up there from Mitch McConnell. We'd originally put it up there, A1F. As you can see there that Mitch McConnell in that vote about declaring this an unconstitutional impeachment trial is beginning to show the rumblings from inside the caucus, which is, yes, he floated it privately. He probably and that's why he's always leaked it privately, saying that he might be open to conviction, etc. But enough members like Ron Johnson and Lindsey Graham and others made it known. They're like, okay, you do that and we will vote you out. And I think that has made it now so that even people like in the establishment, John Cornyn and others, who hated Trump and also, came out against him on many times, have realized that if they vote on that, and if McConnell were to pass up them on impeachment and they didn't take him down, they themselves would face accountability back home from their base. And this is just the internal dynamics of the Republican Party, and why we keep emphasizing it, is that Trump has broken everything down on the lines of himself and by proxy, stop the steal and impeachment. This is something Ross Douthat, my friend over at the New York Times, let's throw this up there. He has this great column that came out this week about how Trump ate populism. And what he talks about there is that populism under Trump, before the Capitol riots and all that, there was a debate around what it really was. Obviously, I think we know essentially what it materialized into, but that now part of the problem is that because Trump himself embodied whatever all that force was, is that now everything is bifurcated along the I like Trump or I don't like Trump line. Mm-hmm. And that means that when it's all just about cult of personality and by proxy also now about stop the steal and impeachment, that it will just be an ever-limiting force that can just mean whatever you want it to mean. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here, which is that you can see guys like Rand Paul, who is an avowed libertarian, being like, I'm going to stand up against this attack on our Constitution. The next day, the guy's going to vote against like COVID relief. Yeah. Rand Paul would vote against like a $1 increase in COVID relief for all of Americans, because that's how much of a moron that he is. And you can see that when it becomes to mean nothing, as it is currently, then you're basically screwed, because you don't have a message that can appeal broadly, and the future of the party is very grim.
It just means Trump. I mean, It doesn't mean nothing. It just means Trump.
Yes.
And this is from Ross's piece, which is excellent. I think he writes some really smart things over at the Times. He says, now populist loyalty to Trump requires embracing belief he just had a landslide election stolen, and as long as that idea defines the right, the space to be a populist who isn't just working to restore him or his family, Trump or his family, in 2024, with all the prospects for Holly-like debacles such work entails, seems somewhere between cramped and non-existent. Yep. And this has always, the irony here, and this is what Ross also gets at in his piece, is like, in a way, Trump opened up this new avenue because he showed that the base of the GOP didn't care about your stupid debt and deficit and we've got to have fiscal austerity and we've got to cut entitlements 100%. And all this stuff that Paul Ryan centered the party around. The base was like, we don't actually want any of that. Not only are we indifferent to it, we are actively opposed to it. So he sort of exposed that. He was, brought the party rhetorically to a different place with regards to the Iraq War and the endless wars in the Middle East. But on the other hand, he actually effectively destroyed any chance of a real change in an economic populist direction by just making the whole project about himself, his family, loyalty to him, buying into whatever insane conspiracy theory or actions of the day he's all about. And so instead, what being a populist now means is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is an insane person, who is not only a Parkland truther, she's also a Sandy Hook truther. She's been posting on Facebook before she was in office. She liked comments about executing lawmakers and trafficked in all this rhetoric about bringing them to the gallows and all this crap, and is, all in on stop the steal and dabbled in QAnon and all this stuff. That has literal zero policy consequences that are going to benefit you in your life. And it's all about just embracing the insane conspiracies of the Trump era. And that she will have tremendous success.
I was going to say.
And will be tremendously popular with the base of the Republican Party because Marjorie Taylor Greene And her approach to politics is basically all that populism on the right has come to mean. And that is 100% at Trump's feet.
Yeah, no, that is Trump's problem because he polarized, like I said, everything along. I mean, she can be the biggest populist when she just wears a mask that says Trump won in the Capitol, because even though she doesn't want to wear a mask. And I don't want to delude people. Like, these stories attacking her will only actually make her far more popular amongst the Republican base. She is actually a very representative, and that pains me to say, but it is true. There are a lot of people, especially on the right, who have long believed these types of things, and this kind of current has always been there. It's what the establishment has always kind of looked down upon their voters and been like, yeah, we need to keep some of this stuff down. But then they would pair it up with deficits, and then somebody like Trump can come along and be like, no, I'm actually going to dabble in this and say, screw your deficits. Turns out he's overwhelmingly popular within the GOP base. It's for reasons like this. I believe that she, by far more than anyone else in the caucus, represents the future of that party. And it's actually tempting because I see this question all the time. People will be like, what about the left? Well, I mean, we know this. In terms of the left of the Democratic Party, it's actually quite split. Like, there is a much larger constituency, I think, for, like, the Joe Scarborough MSNBC people. They're the ones who won and voted in the Democratic primary. Whereas when you look at the Republican Party, I think that the Republican elites are far more out of step with their actual core base than some of the Democrats are. And this is the biggest problem they're always going to have. And it will always allow Marjorie Taylor Greene and them to succeed. And as we said, that's a minority party forever. That will never win more than 35% of the vote.
Yeah.
Maybe 40% of the vote on a national election. And on a state-by-state basis, disaster. Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I mean, look at the map. Pat Toomey's retiring. That's going to be a blue seat.
Yep.
Now, Rob Portman, we'll see. I think it's a red state, but whoever does take that, it ain't going to be a populist. I can tell you that.
If you end up with someone who's wildly outside of the mainstream, even in a state like Ohio,
right. You could Todd Aiken the whole situation.
Absolutely. That is definitely within the realm of possibility, especially in a Senate race. When it's a statewide race, people look at least a little bit more at the candidate themselves versus just their tribal loyalties. I mean, still, a lot of it is built in by the national political wins and the tribal loyalties, but you can distinguish yourself a little bit more on a candidate-by-candidate level. I mean, two things. First of all, the Joe Scarborough thing is like a self-fulfilling prophecy because that's who they decided to build the party around. Yeah. So, like, you build it and the affluent suburbanites who don't really care about anything but civility will come. So that is certainly the case. True. But, yeah, you combine that with the black and brown working class within the Democratic Party and, an overwhelming majority of young people. And you've got a solid majority for the future. Now, that's nothing for Democrats to get arrogant about. Last time they got arrogant about the coalition of the ascendant, didn't work out so well for them because you have to predict and expect that your opponent is going to try to adjust. But as long as you're going down the direction of Marjorie Taylor Greene, as lackluster as the Biden administration may be, you will end up as basically a regional minority party. And all the incentives in there are to be Marjorie Taylor Greene because, again, she's already got great celebrity. We're talking about her here. How many other freshman members of Congress are we talking about right now? She's wildly popular within the Republican base. And because seats are so gerrymandered, where you really have to worry more about primaries to your right or primaries to your left than you do at going head-to-head with someone in like a swing district, all the incentives are there for the party to just continue to trend increasingly in that direction. Yeah,
that's right. I think this quote from Portman Advisor says it all. They asked Corey Bliss, why is Portman retiring? He says, quote, if you want to spend all your time on Fox being an asshole, there's never been a better time to serve. If you want to spend your time being thoughtful and getting shit done, there's never been a worse time to serve. 100% true.
Not that we're Rob Portman stands here
by the way,
whatsoever.
I don't like Rob Portman. Like, he,
Right.
USTR, bad for Ohio, deficits,
and look, also,
Bush.
all these freaking people are complicit in leading the party and the country in the Marjorie Taylor Greene direction, whether they want to admit it or not. But that quote is on the nose.
This is correct still.
100%.
Now, he's being thoughtful and wants to serve to do the wrong thing, but you could be thoughtful and want to serve and do the right thing, but that's also not happening. Everybody just wants to go on Sean Hannity's show and be a star. So there you go.
There you go. We're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.